Okay, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I'm Mindy Towsley. I'm the Executive Director of the Artist Archives of the Western Reserve. For those of you who don't know what the Artist Archives is, we are a regional museum and unique facility which collects representative bodies of work by Ohio's visual artists. We have 10,000 works in our collection by 89 archived artists. We do have a physical gallery space, and the show that is up right now, which is part of that gallery space, is Kindred Objects, curated by Davin Ebanks and Peter Christian Johnson. And we're very pleased to have you with us tonight. And for our featured guest speaker, Susie Silbert, who is a curator at the Corning Museum. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our funders for the archives: Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, the Ohio Arts Council, the Gunn Foundation, the Zufall Foundation, the David E. Davis Foundation, and of course, all of our members and volunteers, our board of directors, and our staff. So I'm going to introduce our staff to you next. I'm going to start with Kelly Pontoni, who's our collections registrar. She'll be helping us tonight with some technical issues, which hopefully she won't have anything to do. We hopefully won't have any technical issues, but you never know. And our program director and marketing director is Megan Elves. And Megan will introduce Susie to you and also go over a little bit of housekeeping rules. Megan, if you'd like to take it away.
Sure thing. Everyone, welcome to the program today. So welcome to Contemporary Glass with Susie Silbert. This is our final program of 2021. In many ways, this is a perfect program to end on. It actually sums up a lot about who we are as an organization, and including our program's commitment to amplify underrepresented voices, to promote the work of women and artists of color, and generally to pull the reins of art history back from the white male academy who kind of runs the show. So while our presenter, Susie, has been proudly undermining that narrative, she's enthusiastic, she's engaging, and we're just honored to have her here today to share knowledge and her perspective. So let me give you a little bit about her background before we begin. Susie was appointed as the Curator of Modern and Contemporary Glass at the Corning Museum of Glass in 2016. So trained in glassworking and design history, she's motivated by the complex and intertwined stories and histories of materials, making, and makers in all media. As part of her curatorial role at the museum, Silbert serves as the editor of New Glass Review, which she'll be talking about later. So that is an exhibition in print designed to provide a snapshot of global glassworking on an annual basis. So she's the perfect presenter for this program. Prior to joining the Corning, Silbert was an independent curator working across disciplines, as well as a lecturer of glass at the Rhode Island School of Design. Her writing was appeared in exhibition catalogs for many museums, as well as the American Art Collector, Glass Quarterly, Metalsmith, the American Craft Council website, and the book Cast. Silbert holds an MA in Decorative Arts, Design History, and Material Culture from the Bard's Graduate Center. So amazing pedigree. We're so excited to have her here today. Before we begin, just a little bit of Zoom tech for you. We know you're really familiar with Zoom at this point, but how we're going to run things today is that there is a chat. So the chat function is at the bottom for most setups, and you'll be able to either talk to everyone or direct questions to the panelists. Or the host. So we're going to use the Q&A. We'll do that in a second. So if you have any problems during the course of the webinar, you can either put it in the chat or you can raise your hand. So not physically, though, I won't see you, but the hand function in Zoom. Now Q&A. So we're really excited to have this portion of the program. Q&A is actually a separate function in chat from in Zoom. So it's two little bubbles at the bottom. And go ahead and pop your questions there. If you put them in chat, I honestly might miss them, so I would hate to do that. We'll try to get through as many of the questions as we can at the end of the program. So that's pretty much it. If you have anything, let me know. Sit back, relax, kick off your bunny slippers, and enjoy Susie, who's going to take over the show for now.
Gosh golly, thank you. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Mindy, for those introductions. Listen, I'll try to do my best to live up to that. That was like a big mouthful full of like exciting and fancy things, and I will just do the best that I can in this time to, to make it worth your evening's while. So I'm gonna set up my share, get all my things situated, and then really talk to you. There we go. Okay, it's looking good. You guys got that? Okay, great. But I'm on not the first slide, so I will go to the, ooh, I'm at the last slide. Can't share it, can't show you all of those things. Have to stop and start. There we go. Okay. Well, now you got a preview, now you got a preview. You know where we're going. And maybe you don't know how we're gonna get there. So, so there's still some excitement to have. So first thing, I just wanted to really, really thank you all for being here. I want to thank the Artists Archives for giving me the opportunity. It is such an incredible honor to be here in this moment with all of you who I trust are there, even though I am, just so you know what I'm experiencing, I am talking to a picture of myself and can't see anybody else. So if I seem like a little off, that's why. But I especially in this pandemic time, especially just in general, it is such an incredible opportunity to get to talk about things that I am so passionate about, and to get to come beam at you from my little spot in Corning, New York, which is Western New York, to you. And what you see on the screen is a little picture of part of the museum, so you can be knowing that that's what we're talking about while I get going. And I am just there. Now you're really seeing it? Okay. I am just absolutely pleased as punch to be speaking near this incredible exhibition, Kindred Spirits, which is curated, as Megan mentioned, by Davin Ebanks and Peter Christian Johnson. I have so much respect and admiration for Davin and Peter's work, for this exhibition, and for the artists in it. It's a big work to put an exhibition together. I really understand that. And it's absolutely in line with teaching, which both Davin and Peter do. So it is really, truly my pleasure to be here right now. And the show, which, listen, if you're in the Cleveland area, you should really go see, showcases so many talented Ohio-based artists, many of whose work you can see on the screen. These objects, and the ones I'm showing, and the ones that fill out the remainder, sorry, it was flashing me some kind of weird thing, but I hope what you are seeing is the slideshow. That is, right? Great, wonderful. They show, the works in this show the incredible breadth and depth of the fields of glass and ceramics. I mean, really, it's incredible to be in this time in 2021, where the fields of glass and ceramics are so big and so expansive that they encompass a range of approaches to material, to technique, and to concept. And so I am not going to attempt to give a comprehensive look at contemporary glass or an in-depth look at the works in this show. Rather, I'm envisioning this talk as a little bit more of a chat with me, although one-sided until you put things in the Q&A. And I'm thinking, the things I'm showing you, these are some ways that I'm thinking about glass right now. There's some artists, 3 artists I'm going to be showcasing, whose works are really informing those thoughts. And I hope it's a contextualization, a glimpse into other aspects of the field, particularly in glass. But really, so you do know where we are going, here is my message. Every single artwork, every single artist is inviting you, me, us on a journey with them into the ways they are thinking and seeing the world around them, into the ways that they are assimilating new information that life brings them. The objects are ways of knowing, ways of making sense of the world around them. And that is true as much for the artists I'll show as it is for the artists in this incredible exhibition, which I hope you'll all see. And another idea I had just like in the minutes leading up to this, as I was thinking a little bit more about what the Artists Archives is all about, is that the 3 artists I'm showing you are artists that are connected to place. And through their connection to place, either their place of origin, and in some cases by being zooped from that to a different place, they're thinking about what it means to live and to be tied to a land and to be informed by a landscape. And I really can't think, I wish I had said that was how I put this together. It's not, but I can't think of anything that might be more appropriate to some of what the Artists Archives is doing than that. So with the thesis out of the way, we can begin to talk about some work. And the things that I've been thinking about this year, or really since the start of the pandemic, can be conceived of under the ideas of sampling, fracture, and repair. Sampling is how we bring knowledge into our work, how we bring together the various different parts of ourselves, how we make evident where we have been and where we are going. And an artist that I am super privileged to have worked with this year that really demonstrates the power of the sample so well is Leo Tecosky, who's an American artist based in Brooklyn and originally from Miami. So he grew up in Miami, originally born in New Mexico, but raised in Miami, and really informed by the landscape of Miami, and really informed by the things that were happening in that landscape in the time that he was growing up. And in particular, graffiti, scenes of graffiti and hip hop, and thinking about those things and thinking about an artist's way of working. But he was a person who was also trying to find his way in the world. And he would spend summers in Vermont with an uncle of his and who had a bakery. And he was thinking, you know, I'm not sure that I'm going to pursue this like college thing. It didn't seem like it fit as part of the hip hop culture that he was striving to be a member of. And he also didn't have a sense, like so many artists that I work with, didn't have a sense that art was something that you could do in college. But he met a friend who was going to school down the road from where I stand right now as I deliver this talk, at Alfred University. And that friend told him, you know, you can do this metal work that Leo had already started doing. You can do glass, you can do other things. And he got there and he was part of a crew of folks. He tells a story about rolling up on the campus and seeing a bunch of break dancers and feeling like, oh, I understand this. I understand what this is, like what this is about. I can do this. I can find a way to bring together these diverse influences in my life and find artwork out of it. And what I mean by that is I told you about graffiti and I told you about hip hop, but one of the things that's important to know about hip hop is that hip hop combines 4 elements. And those 4 elements are graffiti, breakdancing, DJing, and rapping. So all those things, they're physical. It's a physical art form. There's a series of physical art forms. When you're writing graffiti on a wall, you are using your hands and your body. It's a time-based media. You can't be, as Leo says, you can't be up on that wall forever. You got to get in there and get out. Breakdancing similarly is about breaking down movements and about a specific way of holding breath and holding your body in place. And DJ and MCing, they are all different modes of working. And I think one of the things that was so appealing to Leo as a human being and as a young artist was the idea that way of working, that both graffiti and hip hop and the component parts are art forms that bring together a range of influences. They can incorporate aspects from all over the world into one framework. So he got to Alfred and he did a number of things, but he discovered neon, and you know, neon is light. All of a sudden you could take those words, you could take those tags and you can put them into light. You can make your handle answer is what the piece on the left says, manifest density, and early works where he's trying to figure out how to incorporate the hip hop that he's feeling, that he's a part of, into the studio and into the work. And I think so much of that is really what we might not all be working about hip hop, but the journey of being an artist is so much about being able to take the things that you're interested in, the things that are influencing your life, recognizing what those things are and figuring out how do they fit into the work that I'm doing? How can I make it be more seamless? How can there be a more seamless sense of art and life? And so here are some early examples. I mean, I think every artist I'm talking to about is undergoing those processes. And I think pretty much most artists, if they're being honest with themselves, are doing that. But here you see Leo really working toward that. As he was finishing his undergrad at Alfred, he took some summer classes and he got to do some glass blowing, and he knew that that was something that he wanted to explore, even if it wasn't something that he was going to explore in school. And he did go on to do that. And he was thinking, you know, this is an early piece. He was thinking again about how do I bring, what is it, you know, what is it that I'm trying to bring together? And at that time he thought, okay, I'm trying to bring this graffiti line. I'm trying to bring the words and that feeling, that like movement of the graffiti line into glass, which for a medium like glass that is in a sense spontaneous, when you're blowing glass in the studio, you are moving. It is a fluid movement. It is not actually that different from being a break dancer or a beatboxer or an MC. It is about the way you control your breath and you control your body, and you're working with your medium the way somebody else might be working with beats. But figuring out how to take glass, which wants to be round, and it wants to have round things put on it, and it doesn't really want to have the line and the angles of something like a star, like you see in this piece. Is thinking about how to do that. And Leo, in case you think, like, in case there's some vestige of thinking of hip hop not in the complement of what hip hop is about craftsmanship. And Leo's work is about craftsmanship at every level. And it is, as in hip hop, as in understanding the sample and understanding the basis of things, it is about how you understand your history and how you pay it forward. So in this case, what you're looking at is a piece that is made using a very traditional glass technique called the Swedish Growl. And what that means is he blew the piece small with a blue interior and then thick and clear, and then that peach color that you see on the outside, cooled it down, used a sandblaster to carve in, that shape, the answer, it's his handle again, and the star. And then once that carving was done, brought the piece back into the hot shop. That's where we do glass blowing, could be also called the glass studio, and put it in a kiln again, because glass needs to be heated up slowly so that it doesn't crack. Picked it up on the end of a blowpipe. This is dangerous stuff. He's already spent a lot of hours on this piece, gathered clear glass over it, and inflated to its full shape. So he is using something very traditional, this Swedish technique from the late 19th, early 20th century, and he is saying something new with it. After college, in grad school, he started traveling. He was teaching and he started traveling to Turkey in specific. And here you see the Hagia Sophia, into Istanbul. And he was so influenced by the landscape and by the architecture and by the way that traditional Islamic architecture uses and art uses the written word as an ornamental element. Islam, as you probably all know, is aniconic, which means it's not super into images of people or specific things, but the word is the most important thing, and the word becomes the art form. And he recognized in that a relationship to graffiti and a relationship to many other things that he was thinking of, and he felt like an immediate affinity to that place and to that work. And one thing he and I have talked about a lot is about the way that the places that he's most drawn to, Miami, where he grew up, New York City, where he lives, Istanbul, and North Africa, where he spent so much time, are places that, like hip hop and like graffiti, engage so many cultures. They're places where there are crossroads and cross-cultural confluences. So there is so much of interest from place to place. There's so much to draw from. There is not cultural hegemony. There's heterogeneity. And in that heterogeneity, there's opportunity for growth and for space. And so he started to find work in that. And Leo himself relates to that heterogeneity. He is Ashkenazi Jewish and Black American, and he thinks of he is experiencing it in his own self. You know, that means you are in that nexus. You can access, and he, I'm bringing myself into that, but you know, he has access to so many different frameworks and so many cultural influences that add into his work. And so he started to bring some of those patterns and some of those forms into his pieces, making these flat works. But he was recognizing that it wasn't quite there yet. He wasn't all the way to where he wanted to get to. He was trying to understand, what is it that makes these Islamic patterns so appealing to me? And he started listening back to the music that had given him his basis, this early hip hop, KRS-One, Eric B. and Rakim, early Queen Latifah, and Gangstar, Guru, thinking about the words that they say. And he learned that what they're talking about is the 5% Nation and supreme mathematics. The 5% Nation is a cultural group that started in Harlem as a way to encourage folks who didn't have access to other kinds of education to pursue knowledge of self, to find their way in the world, to learn things. And one way that it advocated that is through something called the Supreme Alphabet. And in the Supreme Alphabet, each letter signifies a different thing. And it should be noted, the 5% Nation is from Islam in its Black American context. So the founder, Clarence 13X, had been part of the Nation of Islam, but found the Nation of Islam to be too restrictive in many different ways. And so started his own group, which didn't have these restrictions, but said you really should be paying attention to things. So he understood the Supreme Alphabet, and the B, to be or be born, is going to be important later in this story. So if you just hold that in your head, you'll get there. And he started to think back to the music that he was listening, think back to the ways that he can use glass, to the ways that he can add and layer meaning, sampling, you know, another sample to bring in. And he was helped in this in around 2016 by discovering the hot shop, where he was able to start sculpting in 3 dimensions, the forms that he had previously only been able to make in those flat panels or to carve into the glass. So you see on the bottom, a piece with arrows called So Many Styles. And the arrow has been an essential element of graffiti for a long time, but you can see it in this image, a sketch by Phase 2, who is credited with introducing the arrow into New York graffiti in the late 70s, early 80s. So Leo is working through that. I'm trying to think about, how can I make these hip hop elements more than just surface, but actually what the work holds. And you can see that he started to bring that in to more space, and that the work navigates, hanging from the ceiling, lit up, it navigates many spaces. It's occupying space and taking space in a new way, that it's there, but it's also there in its negative image. And he started to think about how he could combine that with neon, and how he could bring these elements into architectural space. So take the hip hop, take the elements that he's drawn to from Islamic architecture, and bring them into a space to create this kind of overall pattern that he was so influenced by. And as you might be able to see in the image, like right in the center, there's a crown on one of those blown pieces of glass. So he's also thinking about, how can I take these glass pieces and add and layer more information in these? And he collaborates a lot with a fellow named Simon Clenell in Sweden. And Simon, he was in Sweden, and Simon taught him about this traditional Swedish glass cutting, which is like, you know, the Swedes are very good at it. And he started making these cut pieces, but instead of having these traditional cut glass patterns, he incorporated here, you know, he's using these traditional structures and frameworks, but he's starting to add in Islamic patterning. He's starting to add in other things, and all of that's super critical because if you were wondering where this was all going, it's going to the next slide, because he just finished the newest piece added to the Corning Museum of Glass. And the newest piece on view is this incredible piece called the 36th Chamber, which builds on all of these different things that I've told you about, and that I really hope this has made sense. This is the first time I'm actually talking about Leo's work to like people in the world, rather than just people close by. So hopefully it's making some sense to you. This piece combines all of those elements. It's got the blown glass pieces. I should say, I did mention earlier that glass blowing is a form that wants to be a bubble. Everything in glass wants to be a bubble. You get in the hot shop, you gather glass, you have to keep turning it, because if you don't keep turning it, it'll drip to the ground. You have to inflate it and turn it, and it just wants to work like that. These shapes that you are seeing are ridiculous. They are sculpted into those points in the hot shop, not using any molds. And if you've been in a hot shop or you are a glass worker, you understand. You hope you understand what I'm talking about. That's insane and crazy. And if you are not a glass person, take my word on it for it, and then go find some glass blowing videos or find your way into a glass studio, even better, and watch the people work, and then think, wait a second, how is he making these large pieces with these perfect corners that hold the shape so beautifully? And that's not all that he's doing. After he spends the hour or hour and a half or whatever it takes to make one of these, it cools down slowly, and then he carves the surface and puts the cuts in, these incredible cuts that at this point now mimic that same free movement of the graffiti line, which is no small feat in glass, and then writes on the surface. You might be saying, what is that on the surface? Well, he writes on the surface with the same kind of oil stick marker that could be used for tagging in graffiti, for writing your name. But it turns out, and here, this is a story about craftsmanship and about material and about innovation. It turns out that those oil stick markers have a high enough metal oxide component, titanium dioxide and other things, that they fire onto the surface. So he writes that, cuts it, heats the glass back up, picks it up in the hot shop, heats it again so it fire polishes and so that enamel fuses to the surface, shapes the piece finally, lets it cool down. This is risk. this is to do that is to engage in the craftsmanship of risk, as the craft scholar David Pye calls it, that your every element, every moment, everything could break, but if you can hold it on point, you get something incredible like this. And the piece is combined in these metal frameworks. So he's bringing back his metalworking, and then there is graffiti and stenciling on the wall. But I should say one other thing, because I can't see you to see that you're bored, so I'm just going to say another glass dorky sort of thing. I showed you that Leo was really influenced by Islamic architecture, and then realized that there was this connection because the music he'd been listening to his whole life, and that it influenced him his whole life, was also influenced by Islam. And I told you that Leo's earlier work, he's looking at historical processes, he's looking at Swedish Growl. But in this cooling, painting, reheating, in this workmanship of risk, he's also doing the same movements, putting his body through the same things and his glass through the same elements of risk as Islamic mosque lights from the 19th century and 16th century and 15th century. Those beautiful, incredible pattern things, which if you've gone to a museum, encyclopedic museum, and seen these, they're like incredible things. And they're even more incredible when you know that they had to blow that thin little form and then paint all over the surface and then heat it back up to fire it. And every one of those times there could be loss. So I guess what I'm saying here is this is a way to think about framing, a way to think about using history, learning from history, bringing in samples from all over the place, but combining them, not to create something that looks like it's already been made, but combining them to make something wholly new and that holds a new expression. And I'm going to stop talking about Leo's work in just one second, but I did tell you that that B from the supreme alphabet was going to be important. And it is. You can see it in the center here. And I'm going to go back to the big image. You can see there's also other B words. And B, since I told you there was a quiz, I'm sure you all remember that in the supreme alphabet, B stands for be or be born. So Leo is thinking about that in this piece. He has a 2-year-old who I think is pretty much the light of his life, and he's thinking about that. But he is also thinking about other things that the bee speaks to, like breath. And he is thinking about how in this year, the year that he was making this piece throughout 2021 and coming off of 2020, breath is something that we all are thinking about and need to be thinking about, that it is a year of constricted breath. It's a year when, as he says, people's breath has been taken away from them. And so this is something that to hold in mind. This piece is really about the places, about Miami, about Brooklyn, about hip hop, about graffiti, about Istanbul, and it's about our time, this time where to be is labored and hard, to breathe can be labored and hard and contingent. And so anyway, I really dig this piece and I hope you do too. But moving into the next one, I put in these black slides just so you know, like there's one black slide coming up that has nothing on it. So you know why it's there. It's there because sometimes I forget to breathe. So this is my slide when I'm breathing. Thinking about sampling, thinking about taking influences from all over the place and building something new and whole out of that is, I think, an important way that artists work and that we work and that this moment is about. But fracture and repair is also something that I think is personally resonant for me and maybe for you in this time where so many things have been so difficult. Fracture and repair, I feel like, in so many different ways. But it is also a resonant way for people making artwork. And here I'm going to talk to you about Anjali Srinivasan, who is an incredible artist, now based in Boston, teaches at Mass Art, but is from India. And I'm going to drink some water too, breathe and drink. She also works in many different ways. She does a whole range of things. I'm going to give you a little bit of that range and then take you through things. So she started early on. She works in many different bodies of work at once. She has a whole series called Puffy Glass, which she discovered trying to think about ways to bridge the directness and the humility of things like flour and spices and cooking and the kitchen with something as out of reach for many people as glassworking. And so she came up with a recipe for things that are half flour, half glass, and you fire them and it makes something. You can't eat it despite that good packaging. But she's really thinking about the possibilities of material and again, about the resonance of place. She has a whole series of work that's about bangles, glass bangles. She, after college, she also went to Alfred, was back in India and had a job working for the Indian government, surveying all the different villages that do glassworking techniques. There's so many villages where each one specializes in one specific thing, and they have this incredible traditions that have lasted for hundreds of years, if not more, for making specific things, and glass bangles is one of them. You should watch YouTube videos of glass bangle making. But as India modernizes, there's so much less need for glass bangle making overall. And she later started a studio that in one incarnation brought in artists and designers to work with traditional craftsmen to think about new ways to use what they were using, or to think about this materials, or to think about the raw materials of glass bangle making, which you can see are like those red and green strips in the image on the right, as structures to take apart, to put together, to build something new with. So the image on the left, which is not something, it does kind of remind me of some of the ceramics that are in the Kindred Objects show, but it's not something that you could could set about making in glass. Like, it's not something you would think about, that the material, if you started with the material in an American glass shop or an American university, you would not get to that because you wouldn't have this circular starting point, circular, tubular, or cylindrical, that's what I meant, cylindrical starting point. But if you have that starting point, you can make architectures and you can think in ways that are different. So really, that's interesting. But I think what I'm trying to tell you about is that she is focused on the particular craftsmanships of Indian glassworkers and other craftsmen. And she also does socially engaged work like this piece, where she brought together many different people to make the work. So she is thinking, she is thinking expansively. But I'm going to talk to you about a series of work based on Sheesh Mahal, which is an Indian architectural phenomenon, mirror palaces. So Agra Fort is in Uttar Pradesh, big and beautiful thing built from 1565 to 1573, but it has all these different parts within it. And from a later period is the Sheesh Mahal, which means mirror palace. And here you get one view of this mirror palace. You can't quite tell, but every surface is mirrored within. And these mirror palaces, in a time before electric light, would be lit sometimes by candlelight, which would sparkle like the celestial sky above, like starlight. And also the mirrors in traditional Indian Sheesh Mahal are a special kind of mirror. They're convex. So they miniaturize and multiply. These spaces miniaturize and multiply your reflection, which means you can walk in there feeling like the center of the universe. And maybe you still could feel like the center of the universe, seeing all these sparkling lights above you. But if you look into those reflections, you see, oh, I'm a speck of dust. There are so many of me and I'm so small. And it's a kind of wondrous and humbling experience. And Anjali had been to these spaces. She'd gone to them growing up, but doing this survey for the Indian government, she rediscovered them. And further, talking with a scholar, she rediscovered the following thing, which is that that the craftsmen who made these pieces originally and who would maintain them, they require a lot of maintenance, and who would bring the glass from Rajasthan across Gujarat, it was a traditional tribe. And in the Gujarati earthquake of 2000 or 2001, they had basically been disbanded. They had been assimilated into other work. And so these incredible spaces were falling apart. So she thought of ways to try and connect people to these pieces. And an early experiment was this breathing glass blob, a broken blob with electrical components inside. And if you touched it, it breathed back at you. And that sort of started to get at what she wanted, but she was also, because she's thinking about how do you reinvest the human in the work. And she also made a dress, a silicone skin dress, which she wore around her body, mimicking the curves of this architecture, this Islamic architecture in India. These mirror palaces were built by the Mughals, who were Islamic rulers in India. And she did the glass glove greeting, which was a handshake, basically. She made a sleeve of this glass and she would shake your hand and it would go. And this started to get at the kind of wonder and amazement as she walked by people in this mirrored dress, start to get at that sort of feeling like being outside of where you are, outside of yourself, that you experience in the Sheesh Mahal, but it wasn't quite doing it. So she tried some architectural constructions, like this big mirrored glass ball experience. And she was the Swarovski designer of the year. And she made this piece with Swarovski crystals that was touch responsive. And she's trying to get at that kind of haptic amazement again. She says of this piece that it came from a simple desire. I wanted people to experience the moment where their touch causes another's skin to glow. It's a poetic form of activism. I bring my presence to you, I touch you and you glow. I make a difference to you. So it's that kind of like connection she's interested in, and thinking about the sort of movement, thinking about the skin is so important, because the glass skin in these buildings, I mean, it is a skin, and it's a skin that's put there by humans, and the loss of the humans doing that means that that skin is falling off and fading. And so she made these quiverbles, which you could fold and you can manipulate, but they will lose their glitter over time. And similarly, trying to think about how to take that sort of movement into an architectural framework. So here are this reversible landscape mirrored on silicone skin, which you can manipulate and which changes your image. And these are, you know, painting size. And thinking again about how these could work. And here you see a Sheesh Mahal in Lahore. It really works together, I think, quite well. But this piece, the one on the left, you know, she was able to make them, they're structured and the glass works in the way, but she couldn't quite think, it wasn't big enough, and it didn't live. It wasn't a living thing. And the living thing is part of what's so important about her work. And so the reason I'm talking about Anjali in specific, and that I've been thinking about her so much, is that she has been working on a piece for the museum, which is not quite done yet, but will be done soon and is freaking amazing. So I think I'm kind of scooping a little bit. Don't tell. Here you go. And what the piece is this is an image, a snapshot on her phone, not the best image, on the left of, again, a breathing skin, but the piece itself is 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide. And you see the back. This is a real sneak peek, because the back is just an Easter egg for people that work in the museum. When it's mounted, no one will ever see it, but it shows the framework of what's behind the glass skin that you see on the left. So that overall shape, that pointed arch, and where the darker black lines are, is a structure that's built into the piece behind the glass skin. And what she's done is created a piece that has sensors and that notices as you're standing there, and that breathes back at you. So you stand there and you look at the piece, and the piece breathes back at you while you're there. A subtle breath, as subtle as any of our respirations, or maybe not as subtle as mine because I'm huffing and puffing from talking so much. But what she's trying to do is, again, in this moment, in this time, in a time when actually she hasn't been able to go back to India, where she normally would go. She'd normally spend some of her time, but she hasn't been able to go because of the pandemic, and she has been here. And how do we connect with the places where we're from? How do we connect with the places that we're from? How do we connect with the people that we're from? But we look into sheets of glass, and we hope that our reflection or our projection is not as fragmented as we might feel. And we hope that through the flatness of the screen, which hopefully is brought to you by Corning Incorporated, through the flatness of the screen, you can feel a sense of human connection, that we can overcome the distance, that we can experience the life and the livelihood and the breath of another. And that even if we can't be there to touch this incredible glass skin, we can experience the wonder of the fact that somebody somewhere made it, and somebody else thought about making it. And so this piece too is about place, and it's about connection, and it's about this moment, and it's about breath, which is why we're on this black screen again for Fracture and Repair Part 2, so that I can take a deep breath and drink a glass of water. So the third artist that I'm going to speak to you about is Monir Farmanfarmaian. And if you are a Farsi speaker, either in the audience now or watching this later, I apologize that my pronunciation of Farsi is so bad. But you can see that behind, maybe you can see that behind Monir Farmanfarmaian is another mirror mosaic, except for that which is not just specific to India, but also to Iran, where the Mughals came from. So this mirror architecture started in Iran and then later came to India. Anjali didn't really know about Monir's work when she started this work. In fact, Monir, though she lived this long life, 1922 to 2019, really only became super known later, like in the 2010s, and maybe even especially in a 2015, 2016 exhibition that was at the Guggenheim. But what's interesting to me about Monir's work and about Anjali's work is that here are these two women who made work, who ended up making work that's so specific to their place, but they found themselves making it or thinking those ideas in diaspora. So Monir moved to the United States in the 40s and started working as a textile designer and as a graphic designer. And she made, for anybody that is older than me, I think, and that, or much older maybe, that knew about Bonwit Teller, which was a department store in New York City, it was known for this particular bag and for this particular design, which Monir designed. And if you were like even more up on your like art world of the 50s and department store knowledge, you would know that Andy Warhol was also an illustrator and designer at Bonwit Teller in exactly the same time. So that's sort of interesting, and it might come up later. But she made these drawings, floral drawings, and textile designs and all sorts of things. In the 60s, around the time of this painting, she got married to her second husband and moved back to Iran. And when she was there, she also got a job briefly working for the government, traveling around to catalog traditional crafts in different places. And at that time, Iran was in a majorly modernizing mode. So they were looking west, they were looking, especially at French things. And Monir said, no, we got to look at these reverse painted glass paintings, like the one that you see on the left, these coffee house paintings, and also the Turkmen jewelry. And she started collecting these things. And she eventually helped modernize these traditional crafts, the craft of place, the craft of being rooted and looking and seeing the art forms that are already where you are, and bringing them to wider renown. And she was also, she was making work, but she was also still connected. I didn't really tell you this, but she was like way connected with the New York art scene while she was over here. And when she went back, she was still connected with a bunch of New York artists who would come and visit her. And it was in a trip with Robert Morris and Nancy Graves, I think. But listen, before you quote me, look it up. Or at least then you can quote me and be like, she was wrong, to the Shahroudy Mosque. That again, like Anjali, was a place she had been to before, but here she went and she saw this incredible glittering palace, this overwhelming space, and she saw people coming, the religious coming and praying, and she thought, oh, this is an incredible thing, and why should it be tucked away only in these monuments? What if we could take this and bring it into people's houses and into their everyday lives so that they could live with this experience and this splendor every day? And she set about learning how to do that, which sent her on a quest that is probably longer than I have time to talk to you about today. But she went to, she got a tutor to help her learn Islamic maths and Islamic geometries, and she found traditional craftsmen to help her work and develop the mirror mosaic techniques, which again, my Farsi, no good, but Ayana, oh, I'm really bad today. Aina Kare. Aina Kare is the name for Shish Mahal in the Iranian context. And she began making these incredible pieces that bring this, that worked so well between the sort of modernism and minimalism of her New York crew and the traditionalism of the Iranian work. But she didn't see herself as some kind of like modernist painter. She saw herself as operating within a tradition and taking the elements of the place and bringing them to new spots. So in a way, she is taking her sample and she's recontextualizing it like Leo had done. And this is a pretty nice picture of her with these disco balls. I threw this one in here because she and Andy Warhol traded pieces and he got one of the disco balls. So you can see that she's exploring all of these different sorts of ways of working. This piece is from 1977. For those of you up on your Iranian history, 1979 was the Islamic Revolution. And so she had to leave Iran again. And she spent the next several decades of her life back in New York City, making some work, making some architectural commissions and doing some really incredible drawings and some small textile works, but was depressed for years, as one might be able to understand. She was thinking about the family she couldn't see. She was thinking about the country that was no longer and was replaced. She was thinking about, I'm sure she was probably thinking about all of her artwork that got confiscated. And it wasn't until she was in her 90s that she moved back to Iran and began making these large scale mirror works again. She got united with craftsmen again, and she made incredible pieces, including this one, Lightning for Neda, which is the Queensland Art Gallery, at the Queensland Art Gallery in Australia, a huge piece where you can see this different, maybe you can see in the triangles on the bottom, this different geometric shapes. And she's thinking through there, like in Sufi geometry, each line, each shape has a meaning. So again, not so different from the supreme alphabet and the supreme mathematics that Leo is looking at. And she, like Leo, who is not himself a 5%er, she is not Sufi, but she was influenced by that work, and she understands like its incredible beauty and its cultural importance, and brought this into work. But this is her most political piece that she made. And to think about being somebody at 90 moving back to Iran and thinking about making work and thinking about how to exist in that framework, which had previously felt so limited to her, it's a big, giant deal that she was doing that and that she was able to make these large scale works. And in that last like bit of her life, from when she was in her 80s until her late 90s, she made an incredible amount of work, a huge amount of work, that the way that we know her now. And that, I think, to me is also, wow, that's an incredibly inspiring thing, to think that I could wait until I'm 88, or maybe you feel blocked in whatever you're doing now. But Monir, she started making the work that she's most known about at 88. So there's hope for us. We can still make it happen. And she is thinking about, in these pieces, one of the things that she was thinking about the most in particular is the hexagon, and the way the hexagon and the way geometries allow for so much mutability and so much change. And so these pieces, the piece I'm showing you, which we recently added to the museum's collection, it's the same piece, but it's organized in two different ways. And in fact, it can be arranged in a number of different ways. And what she's thinking about, and what I think is so powerful and so resonant for me, and hopefully for you too, is this idea that we can bring who we are. You know, she can bring this Aina Carré with her. She can bring the mirror work. She can bring the Islamic geometries, but she doesn't have to be limited by it. When it's in the mosque, when it's in the mausoleum, it's fixed. The architecture is fixed. But like this is something that you can bring with you. We bring all of our samples. We bring all of our fractures with us, and working with our fractures, we can begin to arrange them and make them whole. And so I think this is an incredible message. And here also, you know, it has the red part is reverse painted glass. And maybe if you remember, because I showed you so many things, one of the things she did when she came back to Iran is take these reverse painted glass paintings that had been overlooked and say, oh, we should think about this. And it wasn't just those, they were also used in architectural elements. But again, she is using something so traditional to Islamic architecture and to Persian architecture, so traditional. And she is taking it and she is making it new again. She's helping us to see in a new way. And so I suppose, you know, some of that All of these things that I'm telling you about, I am so encouraged by, because these are, I think so much of the time we hear you need to learn from history. And sometimes we learn from history and we think, oh, we're learning from history. And what we're learning is like, oh, well, they did it that way. And that's what we need to do. But actually, that's not what we're doing. We're learning from history, which means we can go somewhere else. If we really listen to what's being presented to us, if we're listening to where our roots are, to what our influences are, to where our samples come from, we can take things and we can bring them to new arenas. We can think in new ways. And so with that, this is the purposeful black screen. With that, I think you might be saying, well, that's really nice. Thank you. I hope you're saying, I do hope you're saying that. But you might also be saying, okay, what does this have to do again? We just went all over the place. We went from Brooklyn to India to Iran, and here we are, wherever we are, but rooted in this organization in Ohio, thinking about Ohio artists. And I think what I am trying to say, if you remember back to the thesis I gave you at the beginning, what I'm trying to say is really that each artist, each work, each place, each exhibition is an invitation. It's an opportunity. It's a sample. It's an opening for each of us, for the artists themselves, to begin to know. It's a door. It's a way of knowing. And each one of these pieces could bring us to places like I've brought you today. And so I really do hope, if you are able, you will come and see this show. And then maybe after you see Kindred Objects and you're feeling good about being in your car, you can come to Western New York and you can see us in Corning. That wouldn't be bad either. But with that, I am done and happy to answer questions, which I hope you have. Thank you very much.
Susie, that was amazing, like amazing. It's so exciting to hear that presentation, and it's just been glorious to follow. So I'm going to remind the audience at this time that if you have any questions for Susie, to go ahead and please put them in the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and ask them out loud. While we're waiting people to pony up and do that, I did want to take a second and actually give a shout out to some of the glass people that are in the audience tonight. So it was scrolling real fast, but I was able to see Benjamin Johnson. I was able to see Carrie Russell Poole. I was able to see Katie Burkett, and I was able to see Summer Bonfiglio, and I was also able to see the curator, Davin Ebanks. So guys, thank you. Also, if you want to tap Susie for any information regarding the show or anything like that, I'd be happy to kick off questions, because I have a million. This is what happens when our historians watch people. So Susie, for you, I've seen in different glass exhibitions, including Kindred Objects, the use of 3D printing coming into the show. It's being used in conjunction with ceramic work and in the conjunction with glass work. Now, from your perspective as a curator and as a person, is that something that can be worked into the glass narrative, or is something that should be considered almost a separate space? There's almost this gatekeeperism, right? Should it be taken over here, or could it be woven in? What are your thoughts on that new media?
I like that question. I feel like we should do a poll with all the listeners. What do you think, you guys? Am I going to say no? It can't be a part, it needs to be a separate thing, or am I going to say yes, it should be part of things? You don't really have to answer, but I totally wish we could. This is one of those times where I wish we could have a Zoom poll. Definitely, I think expansive is the way to be. I don't think that it makes sense to limit people and to limit artists. And I think in the context of materials, in ceramics and in glass, I mean, at this point, using 3D printing and using other digital design tools is not really so new. It's part of the fiber of working. It's part of the way of working. And specific to glass, while there's still there have been some forays into 3D printing glass, there's so much more to do. But glass is a hands-off material kind of anyway. It's a material that requires tools and technology, and always has since the very earliest days. So I'm about it. I think go for it, you guys.
That's a good point. Yeah, both of them are technique based, are process based. So it's sort of an integration of mindset. It makes sense that those things could be conjunctive together. Oh, good. We inspired people. We kicked it going. So this one is actually from Gloria Plevin, and it's concerned to the Breathing Wall Commission of the second artist. Which half was the front and which half was the back? Oh, that's interesting. And also, I think there was just a little bit more elucidation on how it was breathing. I think people interesting. Dang.
Thank you. Thank you for asking that. Since the piece isn't fully done yet, it's harder to convey all of the things. But the broken glass front part, tautology. The broken glass piece on the left, and I can pull that image up again if you guys need to see it, but that one, that's the front, and that beautiful, insane, wood burnt, elaborate pattern on the right, that's the back. That's the gift to the people that work at museums, who I should say, it's not a bad idea to remember them. In fact, for any artist that's here, I mean, you gave a list of artists, and I know many of those guys, and they're boss, so they don't really need to hear this. But just in case, thinking about how you present the work, thinking about how the work goes in, how it's packaged, how it comes out. I remember every excellent piece, every excellently packaged piece that's beautiful to install. So it's not bad to think of the people. And also, listen, a couple of you have asked about my earrings. I'm just jumping in. A couple of people have asked about my earrings. Thank you for asking about them. They're not glass, they're still great. And you too could own some. They're by the artist Laura Wood, who's based in Nashville. And you can get her work at the Penland School of Crafts Gallery, or at the really good shop in Nashville. That's going to take me 1 second. So there you go. But I'm glad you like them. I like them too.
So another one too for you. And I know our director will also jump in as well while people are percolating and thinking, because we got a couple of minutes that if people want to jump in, they're so welcome to do so. Oh, good. Oh, you know what? I'm going to trump my question and go to Davin's question. Mine will come up at the end. I could rattle off a million. Davin Ebanks, so again, co-curator of Kindred Objects, now on view at the Artist Archives, and said, there is so much spectacle in the work you talked about. What are your thoughts on the qualities of glass as relating to the concept of spectacle? It's in quotes, but so concept.
Thanks, Davin. Well, now I wish we were having a conversation, because I'd be like, oh, what do you mean by spectacle? Because I think I agree with you. There's so much spectacle in glass, and I think there's so much spectacle in the performance of glass working, and people want to come and watch the glass working and watch the movement and process of glass. And I can see in these, and I have many thoughts about that, I guess, a range of thoughts about that. But in these works, I think it's a really different, I don't know if I would call it spectacle, but I think that there is something that happens to you as a human as you experience the works, which I don't think I even talked about really as much as I'd like to. So now I'm going to use this.
Looks like you popped in with a little more elucidation on spectacle, the history of glass used in religion to convey wonder. So wonder as related, the concept of wonder is related to spectacle.
Got it. Thinking about the spaces. Well, I'm going to finish what I'm saying, and then I'm going to talk about that, which works in both of them, which is that these are glass works that the making of them is not so spectacle-ish. Each of these artists kind of works in their way, and then the work comes out. But they're works that require peopling, like they require Leo's piece, maybe not as much, but I think it is a work that really gives to you when you're in the space. But Monir and Anjali's work change, like they actually change as you move by them, and then I hope you change too. So I think in that sense, there is like a quiet spectacle, but the notion of spaces of glass, spaces of wonder being built and to enter into, I think, a range of things. And I think I would have a much more in-depth and like good perspective on this had I ever been lucky enough to be in one of these mirror palaces myself. But what I think about that, what I think about them, and what I think about this like enormous investment of time and material and thought in making these spaces in the 15th, 16th, and 17th century is that it shows such a profound understanding of the material that I'm not sure we have in some ways. We have skyscrapers, we have temples of glass, but we don't have in the same way using that reflection to create a space that changes how you feel, that puts you in a new space, and that makes you feel in a new way. So Devin, I'm sure that wasn't good enough, but that's what I got for you right now. And I appreciate that question. And I look forward to more conversation about it because I'd love to hear your perspective too.
And actually, well, let's see if anybody else pops questions in. So speaking of being in the space with the work, so it occurred to me as you were speaking about so much of the art that we consumed during the pandemic was actually images of art, which is always a big distinction to make. It's an image of a painting, it's not a painting. And glass is so, it responds and is so visceral that being in its presence is so much a part of the experience of the work, and it seems like the vehicle of so much meaning is there. While we were in that space where a lot of the art we saw on screens, how did glass artists respond? Did they, to try to convey their work online if they had to, did they try to alter how it was shown, or were they just sort of like waiting it out? Like, did they adapt to try to do an online presentation when we were jammed into those confines during lockdown?
Well, I'll give you my answer, but I think all of these artists that are here are the real experts. But I think glass artists, like artists in general, are resourceful and thoughtful, and they are that way anyway, but they have to be that way because that's what they do and that's what they make. And so I think for people, makers or not, the pandemic's so hard figuring out, can you make something? But I think we've seen an enormous, I mean, video is a beautiful friend of glass and other materials. So I think the artists have done an incredible job. I mean, basically, I could not exist in my role. I could not exist as a human being without the incredible work and dedication of artists. Like, I know I'm talking to you, you know, I mean, I hope that, and you work at an arts org, so you probably understand, and hopefully you in the audience also understand, but I am a person that runs on that, and that I feel so fulfilled by and humbled by and grateful for my opportunity where I have it to learn from artists and to help them bring their work into the world. So I think they do great things, and I'm thankful for that. And I realized I didn't give my, sorry, since I'm not sure if there's questions in this particular moment, just a little plug, you guys. If you are a glass maker, New Glass Review 42, New Glass Review is an exhibition in print, as Megan said at the top. They're open, and they're open through January 6th, and I hope you'll apply or think about applying. And if you are not a glass worker, don't feel left out. New Glass Review is also for you. It has like information. If you're interested, if you enjoyed this talk and you're like, oh, I want to know more about what's happening in glass, New Glass Review is a good place to start. And you can get in our shops, but you can also look at most of the past issues for free on our website. Sorry for the plug. It's a plug.
No, it's awesome. Well, I think if anybody, I feel like they're like digesting. They're soaking it all in so much. So, you know, just please like continue questions. Like if you think of them later and you're like dying to know, you could always email me and I can pop them over just for Susie's consideration. But at that point, I think Mindy will probably wrap it up. And there's so much to think about, and I love the way you structured the talk, and I loved the materiality. As I looked down to see a chat, that was my face looking down to see something mid-sentence. So just thank you, Susie, so much for doing this presentation. This has been amazing. And everybody who is here, if you want to listen to it again and you want to soak in more information and you want to write down the artists and you want to look them up, which you totally should. You should Google them. You should find all of the things. It will be on our website, artistarchives.org, within a week. We always try to do that commitment within a week. There will also be a survey that will happen. We'll go out after this. If you liked it, let us know. As a program manager, that's how we know. If you guys like something, you tell us, you give us good ratings, and I know to do it again versus bleh. And I know you will for this one. So Mindy, let me kick it back over to you for closing remarks. But again, thank you everyone for coming. This was a great turnout. Great to see the artists. And thank you for closing out 2021 in an amazing way for us.
Thank you, Megan. Oh my God, thank you, Susie. That was an amazing presentation. Your students must love you when you're lecturing, because you have so much passion about what you're talking about. It's obvious that you really could not live without art in your life. I mean, yeah, that was a great lecture, really fantastic. Thanks again, everybody. Please come and visit Kindred Objects one more week, a week from this Saturday. So just one more week to see the show. We are open Wednesday through Friday from 10 to 4 and Saturday from 12 to 4. It's a beautiful show. Thanks to all the artists who are part of it and the curators. Thanks to my staff, Megan and Kelly. And again, Susie, thank you so much. Fantastic presentation. Can't wait to go look at the recording of it again. I was taking notes, which I usually don't do. So yeah. So I'm gonna just, yeah. No, go ahead.
No, just thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for listening, everybody. I really appreciate it. Please do see the show and then go and see more artwork and support artists.
And I was going to say, maybe if there is a call for entry for the New Glass Now, if you could send us that information, we could pass it on to some of the artists.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you will definitely get that. Close the loop. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming tonight, and everybody have a good evening. Thank you. Good night.